Donald Trump says he threatened to bomb China. I'm scared. Hold me? Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. For a man who campaigned on no new wars, President Donald Trump sure is seeing a lot of action in his second term. No new wars, technically, but a lot of action. From helping Israel bomb Iran, to recently announcing a massive weapons sale to Ukraine, as it fights China's no-limits partner, Russia. But perhaps the biggest war Trump has to worry about is with China. And on that front, at least, we know he's serious, thanks to some leaked audio.
Putin, I said, if you go in to Ukraine, you're going to bomb out of Moscow. I'm telling you, I have no choice. The public wants it. The public. So he goes like, I don't believe you. He said, no way, and I said, way. And then he goes like, I don't believe you, but the truth is he believed me 10%. And I told you this, he believed me 10%.
I wasn't aware that believing a person could be rated with a percentage, like the battery power on a cell phone. But I digress.
Then I'm with President Xi of China, but I said the same thing to them. I said, you know, if you go into Taiwan, I'm going to bomb the out of Beijing. He thought I was crazy. He said, Beijing, you're going to bomb Beijing. I said, I have no choice. I got to bomb them. We're going to bomb Beijing. And he didn't believe me either, except 10%. And 10% is all you need. In fact, 5% would have been okay too.
You know, I know this is audio of the US president threatening to bomb the capitals of two of the world's largest nations, but my biggest takeaway is that he still says, no way, way. This is why we need younger politicians. The audio was leaked by a donor from a dinner event and mentioned in this book. Now, before you start fretting about a third world war, Trump has been known to slightly exaggerate some things. Some would say the best things. But given Trump's actions with Iran and Russia, these kinds of statements just might be keeping the Chinese Communist Party on their toes. And it's not just words. The US is starting to take action. For one, it's demanding clarity from allies in the Indo-Pacific on their role in a potential war over Taiwan. Specifically Japan and Australia, which surprised both countries, since in the past the US has been pretty ambiguous on how directly it would get involved. Except, constantly holding military drills in the Indo-Pacific, including with many of its allies, which tend to host American military bases and receive tons of American weapons. But just in case that wasn't enough evidence of America's stance on the matter, the US Undersecretary of Defense for Policy has now been having conversations about Taiwan with both the Japanese and Australian defense ministers. He's also been a vocal proponent of shifting US military focus away from the Middle East and Europe towards China. It turns out the Trump administration wants the same thing from its partners in the Indo-Pacific that it wants from Europe. More spending on defense and more cooperation with each other. Which kind of makes sense given China's recent military drills around Taiwan. And by recent, I mean the ones that have been going on since before I had a beard. Last Sunday, the island said it detected 11 Chinese aircraft, 7 naval vessels, and an official ship intruding on its waters and air defense identification zone. And on Wednesday, it was 18 aircraft, 7 naval vessels, and 2 official ships. In other words, just an ordinary week for the CCP. They probably did this between running errands like grabbing groceries and harvesting some Falun Gong organs. China's drills include a major naval formation at sea. But what's especially noteworthy is that it came during Taiwan's annual Han Kuang exercise. And this year's is supposedly one of the most intense ever held. Taiwan's military practiced all-out urban warfare to protect some of Taipei's entrance points, conducted live-fire anti-landing exercises with tanks, armored vehicles, and javelin missiles in Penghu, anti-landing exercises in Matsu, and practiced transporting munitions through Taiwan's metro system. Taiwan has also been training with advanced systems such as the US-made HIMARS and the domestically produced Sky Sword 2 missile system, which is a terrible name, if only because, for a second, it got my hopes up that Nintendo made a Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword 2. Taiwan is preparing, but Japan and Australia, less so. From what we know, both countries are alarmed at China's increasing aggression throughout the region, but they're reacting more like someone laying on a couch watching a bear creep into their home and saying, wow, someone should take care of that. For example, Australia's response to the Trump administration's questions was to issue vague statements about having disagreements with China and opposing unilateral moves in the Taiwan Strait. While in an annual military report submitted to the cabinet last Tuesday, the Japanese Defense Ministry said the international society is in a new crisis era as it faces the biggest challenges since the end of World War II, while raising concerns about an escalation of the China-US rivalry. That's not exactly a resounding, we're with ya. Japan also says that China's military activities could seriously impact its security, which is what Japan has been saying for a long time. Kind of like when someone says they know they really should get that mole looked at. The problem's only getting bigger. Currently, Japan is engaged in a process to boost its defense spending to 2% of GDP, which was, until very recently, what most NATO members spent on defense. But that could take several years and has been folded into trade talks with the US that also might take some time. And whether or not that's enough to deter China is another question altogether. But at least it's something, which still seems to be a step above what Australia is doing. And I'd say nothing, but nothing would be an improvement. Because Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been on a mission to strengthen his country's relationship with China. In fact, he's currently on a trip there to discuss trade and regional security, which explains why he's batting away questions about Taiwan and US defense demands. Australia is saying that only it will decide when and how its military goes to war, and that it won't engage in hypotheticals. In fact, an anonymous US government source said that Australia refused to tell the White House how it might deploy Virginia-class submarines it got through the AUKUS partnership. You know, the subs the US gave Australia? Meanwhile, Australia's defense minister told reporters that the decision to commit Australian troops to a conflict will be made by the government of the day, not in advance, but by the government of the day. Because waiting for the worst thing to happen instead of actually preparing beforehand totally makes sense. Just be spontaneous. That's the motto of the Boy Scouts, isn't it? Just ask Europe and the Middle East how that worked out for them. This isn't very good news for US strategy in the Indo-Pacific, because the US can supply all the military training and weapons at once to its allies or hold military drills, but when allies drag their feet and cozy up to the CCP, it makes deterring or defeating China just that much harder. Sadly, it's not just these other countries cozying up to the CCP. YouTube is as well. They are going after China Uncensored hard. Even though YouTube told me directly they don't do this, they're secretly unsubscribing people. Someone not funny said, I was unsubscribed too. I stopped receiving notifications from this channel a few months ago and I wondered why. I checked and saw that I had been unsubbed. Very suspicious activity from YouTube. Very. And then there's all the algorithmic chicanery. China Uncensored is the largest China channel on YouTube. You'd think the algorithm would recommend it to people interested in China, the way YouTube says its algorithm works. Well, Michael Domansky says, I can't believe it took me so long to find this channel. I've always searched things about the CCP and this never came up as a choice. Kinda odd. Yes, Michael, very odd. That's why I really recommend you sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You'll be notified about all the new episodes, even if YouTube does secretly unsubscribe you. Link to that is below. And while you're down there, go ahead and make sure you're still subscribed. And leave a comment with the honeypot emoji in honor of everyone's favorite communist Pooh Bear to let YouTube know we're on to them. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.